Hi everyone, my name is Hannah, and this week we will start to discuss cultural competency in healthcare. So let's start at square one. What exactly is culture? Culture can be defined as the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a religious, racial, or social group, and that's per the Webster Dictionary. So our own individual culture is defined by our surroundings, family, and friends. We may identify with different groups that kind of have their own individual cultures, like a specific college, a high school clique, organization, or a group of friends. Culture can be thought of as an iceberg. The 10% of the iceberg above the water that's is what's readily visible to the world. This includes many of the physical manifestations of culture, like food, holidays, festivals, and many aspects of language and art. Moving on to the underwater 90%, this is the more deeper foundational stuff that really grounds the culture's values and worldview. So underwater, but a little bit more surface level, includes communication style and rules. So this includes things like facial expression, body language, like rules related to personal space and touching and eye contact, conversational social norms, and tone of voice. And then a little deeper from the surface of the water includes perception of manners, friendship, what leadership means, beauty and the concepts related to one's place in the world, ego, concept of time, what's fair and just, gender roles, age roles, family roles, and class roles. And then even deeper underwater includes some of the most foundational things like the attitudes towards the role of elders, rules, authority, work, sin, death, and the group's approach towards religion, courtship, marriage, raising children, decision making, and problem solving. What defines your culture? We all have a culture personal to our experiences, upbringing, relationships, and surroundings. Identifying what defines your culture can make you more aware of who you are as a person and how you relate to others. Let's take a moment to think about what defines yours. I would imagine everyone at this course is at a different place with really understanding what defines their culture. Personally, as a young white woman from Midwest America who lives in Midwest America, I often find myself being surrounded by people with similar cultural values. It can be hard to step back and really define what exactly those cultural values are because I'm so embedded in them. Truly understanding your own culture and your own values and who you are as a person takes a lot of time, thought, and effort. And this obviously isn't something I can do for you, but I'll give you the following thought experiment. Take a moment to pause this video and think about a moment that truly felt gratifying to you. It doesn't need to be a big event, and it doesn't need to be the most gratifying thing that's ever happened to you. It could be something small that happened yesterday or something from 10 years ago. Press play again once you have a specific moment in mind. What are some words you could use to describe the experience? Try and write down 5 words that really describe this experience and why it was gratifying. Why did you pick these words? Looking back on the iceberg slide, what hints would these words provide to your own personal underwater 90%? These words will likely give some insight to your own personal value system. If you are still struggling to think of some of the larger things that define your culture, here I have a few small examples of cultural values for individuals who identify as Midwest Americans like myself. These do not perfectly apply to every person living in the Midwest, but there are some general cultural values found in many individuals who have spent significant time here, particularly during their formative years. Being a student at the U of M, you likely know a lot of that 10% of the iceberg, the language, the holidays, the clothing. Some of these deeper underwater ideals include a focus on serving and recognizing the youth, a large importance placed on the self, more of an egocentric cultural values here. The culture places high value on being independent and being individualistic. There is great importance placed on the nuclear family structure of 2 parents with children, and with delayed youth independence and really keeping children in the family until they're 18. And hard work is also something that's very valued. Culture impacts the way people view healthcare. It contributes to how people define what healthy versus sick looks like, and culture outlines the manner of treatment that people deem most appropriate for themselves when they are sick. Most of the infrastructure of the U.S. healthcare system was developed prior to the Civil Rights Movement and was designed to cater to the dominant culture at the time. This propagated institutional discrimination against minority groups and unfortunately continues to do so today. With the growing racial and ethnic diversity in the U.S., health systems must adapt to accommodate the preferences and values of the patients they serve. I won't repeat the information about how deep health disparities run. Hopefully you got a good understanding of this from this course's section on health disparities. And as much as I'd like to throw some statistics at you, I just don't think that would do these disparities justice. If you are interested in learning more, I would suggest looking through the Institute of Medicine's 2003 report on unequal treatment, confronting racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare, that initially unveiled many of these disparities through an extensive literature review. Some common examples where cultural differences arise in healthcare are views on chronic disease. Some cultures see sickness as a temporary state, and that medication should only be used when people are sick, and that medication should not be taken long term. These cultures are often not on board with the way the US practices healthcare, but generally are on board when it comes to urgent care and the use of antibiotics to treat those more severe and acute conditions, using practices that produce very apparent and immediate healing. Another is the use of gelatin capsules or pork product containing medications. It's really important to consider these medication components when prescribing and dispensing medications for individuals who do not consume pork. In cultures that practice fasting, like during Ramadan, it's very important to consider what this means for their medications and how dosing schedules or types of medications can be adjusted to address their needs. And then as for decision making, some cultures are very, very gut-based, and some want as much information as possible to feel comfortable making a decision, and some want to defer to someone else to make their healthcare decisions for them. Another example is funeral practices and death rituals. These look very, very different from culture to culture. And kind of one example in the US healthcare system that was highlighted as very unaccommodating to other cultures was the US intervention in Nigeria during the 2015 Ebola outbreak. I would recommend the following article if you are interested in learning more. University College London experts from many different fields, including anthropologists, social scientists, and medics, came together to argue for the importance of addressing culture in healthcare in a recent article published in The Lancet. The authors argue that cultures of all kinds, not only people's religious or ethnic identities, but also professional and political cultures, have been sidelined and misunderstood by both medical professionals and society as a whole. Their research leaves the reader with the following consensus. The systematic neglect of culture is the single biggest barrier to advancing the highest attainable standard of health worldwide. The World Health Organization currently defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. This definition implies a positive definition of health, where health is seen as having something, in this case, having 3 things. Do you think this is the best definition of health? Do you think that you can be healthy without having complete physical, mental, and social well-being? The word complete can be kind of challenging. It implies that those with a physical or mental chronic condition are never truly healthy. For a culture that recognizes sick as only acute things, is this really a fitting definition? In response to the World Health Organization definition and the rise of chronic disease worldwide, a paper published by the British Medical Journal in 2011 proposed an alternative to the original WHO definition from 1948, a little outdated, which is the ability to adapt and self-manage. This doesn't imply that they are 100% free of disease or infirmity, but implies an individual or group can navigate life with some autonomy. Personally, I think autonomy, or the ability to operate independently, free from external control or influence, is just a massive part of health. Being able to make your own decisions and go through daily life without assistance or a ton of forethought for small tasks is a huge part of what defines health for me personally. I'd like for you to take a moment and think about what health means to you. How would you define health? What would the positive attributes of the definition be? These are the things that you must have in order to be considered healthy. And what would the negative attributes be? These are things that if you have them, that means you are sick or unhealthy. Maybe these things are something like free of all curable ailments, or not currently running a temperature, or free of social conflict. Using this definition, would you consider yourself healthy? What would it take to get you there? Highlighting mental health as an example of how culture impacts health. Understanding culture's impact on mental health and its treatment is extremely important, especially in the light of recent reports highlighting the realities of health disparities and unequal treatment. Although no one model can adequately capture the complex facets of culture's influence on mental health, the Cultural Influences on Mental Health, or CIMH model, serves as an important framework for understanding the complexities of these interrelationships. And then the model is shown here as follows. Because of the multitude of ways that culture can influence mental health issues, these domains are not meant to be all-inclusive, but rather just provide a starting point for really understanding the more visible ways that culture influences the development and treatment of mental illnesses. Culture influences each one of these above domains, which are also clearly and kind of pretty logically related. For example, in looking at depression, cultural differences in the expression of distress, either emotional distress or physical symptoms, can influence the diagnostic accuracy and assessment of depression, which in turn impacts our ability to reliably estimate the prevalence of depression. What one believes to be the cause of one's problems, like either bodily issues causing depression or depression causing physical health problems, also plays a role in where one seeks help. So maybe they'll go to primary care versus a mental health care facility. And also one's confidence in the treatment being provided. For instance, like maybe the belief that talk therapy is effective versus feeling like talk therapy or talking about your own problems actually makes them worse. Research conducted to examine how culture impacts each one of these domains, as well as how they are systematically interrelated, continues to be limited. Understanding these interrelationships is integral to understanding how culture influences the development, progression, and treatment of mental health illness. And if you're interested in this topic and would like to learn a little bit more about more specific examples or mental health stigma across cultures, I have a couple different examples here that I thought were just very interesting to read through.